it's Dan Berlin, the Sports Junkie, here for Paxils.com. And I got to admit, I'm not a big fan of squash the vegetable, but I am a huge fan of squash the sport. But I'm looking for a place to play. And I think I found it right here at Downsview Park with one of the greatest squash players ever to play. I'm now joined by former world #1 squash player Jonathon. How are you doing today, man?
Yeah, no, everything's smooth.
Hey, good stuff, man. Hey, I got to ask you, man, it's been about 4 years since you retired from professional squash, where you basically became the first ever North American born squash player to make it to the world #1. I know when you retired, the big mission statement was, I'm going to dedicate myself to the growth of the sport. So take me through the last 4 years. How did things stand with that project?
Yeah, it was sort of a bit of a shocker when I gave up the tour. You know, it's the only thing I've done my whole life, right? From the age of 16, I just sort of traveled around the world playing squash, and I wanted to help get the sport to more people and grow the sport. And I done everything I wanted to do within the sport in terms of playing, so I wanted to sort of broaden that base of people playing, and it was a bit tough being retired. I was pacing up and down my apartment for the first few months going, what am I talking about? What am I going to do? But once I settled into my groove, I sort of realized this focus on how I was going to do it, and I was going to build a physical center here and just try to get more kids involved and get a lot of kids playing, a lot of programming. So I started with my Power Squash Academy, and now we're building the first 10-court complex here at Downsview. So it's predominantly for the high-performance team stuff, but it's also kid-focused. We're going to be busting in a lot of schools and getting a lot of exposure to kids that don't necessarily get access to clubs. What I want to do is take squash out of the private clubs and bring it to a more public facility where kids can just play, and it doesn't cost them an arm and a leg, and it should be a relatively cheap sport because you just need 2 rackets and a ball and go to it. So.
Sure. And what I find interesting, you talk a little bit about the transition from being a professional athlete to basically, trying to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life. I mean, talk a little bit maybe about this project itself. How ambitious has it been? Has it been even harder or more difficult or more of a love affair? Like, how do you describe it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a difficult thing to describe, but it's something I've been passionate about my whole life, and trying to galvanize the whole squash community and bring them on side with this kind of project to do something that's totally out of the box and not necessarily for profit, but just to try to grow the game. It's a bit of an ambitious proposition for some, but the community seems to have responded and starting to support me, so it's looking good.
When you were #1, certainly in this country, in Canada, I mean, it felt like it got to the mainstream a little bit. Obviously, you were world #1. Do you feel like at this point, the state of squash, is it going in the right direction as far as you're concerned?
Yeah, I mean, there's more people playing and there's more kids, but it's very gradual, right? I want to sort of, I think it's a perfect sport for Canadians especially, or anybody that lives in a Nordic society where we spend most of our time indoors. It's the healthiest sport, rated by some of the top magazines in the world. Everybody's, the cardiovascularly, it's just a great game, right? You don't need to get 22 guys together to play a game. It's one call and fun sport, and I just want to sort of get more people doing it.
Well, and that's it, right? You built the facility for people, and if you build it, they will come through.
Yeah, I feel the dream.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, I think that's.
I'm no Kevin Costner there.
I don't know, man. I wouldn't necessarily see. You might have a future in acting, if you keep it up. So let me ask you, man. Not only are you building this incredible facility, you've also put out some instructional DVDs. I checked it out. It was above the tin, I believe it's called. Your 100 favorite drills. Now, I don't have one favorite drill. How are you able to find 100? Isn't that like 100 favorite
100 out of 1,000 that I've done over my life. My top 100 favorite vegetable. I like it.
Yeah, it's the other kind of squash, right? It's like you almost have to have 100 favorite vegetables. I'm like, I have trouble kind of scratching. Where do you find 5? But
yeah, no, I can get a few.
Well, I know, like, you were basically, I don't know if hothead is the best way, but you were definitely volatile on the court back in the day. Is that reflected in the video? Is that like one of the drills, how to like sound off on the ref.
How to snap your racket over your knee and
that's
go off on the ref. No.
So what is the best technique?
Yeah, exactly. Just Bo Jackson style. Boom.
How are you able to use like playing on the edge and that kind of volatility to your advantage as a player on the court? Because a lot of people feel like, hey, composure is the key to success, but yet you kind of disprove that theory a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think it was a key to my success being totally off the wall, but I only sort of know one way to compete, and I just sort of very passionate and balls out all the time, and it hurt me and helped me. I wouldn't say I wouldn't recommend it, but if it's you gotta be yourself. But if you're trying to be that, you're on the wrong path.
Well, you're talking a little bit about the state of the game. You know, I was reading recently that I wouldn't say it was a setback, but certainly a disappointment when squash wasn't included in the Olympics.
I'm not sure how relevant, how much squash would. I mean, there's a lot of good things that would come from the Olympics, a lot of infrastructure on the courts that would be built and stuff like that. But you know, the Olympics is a money-making business, and it's not based on amateur sport or anything like that. It's about getting beach volleyball and golf and rugby and making some cash off some new sports, and that's their new mandate, I guess, now. And squash doesn't necessarily fit into that mold.
Well, I think you hit it on the head. Basically, they're looking, you know, if they do golf, for instance, can they solicit professional golfers to come and ultimately market it?
Right. So like one shot at Tiger Woods is worth 400 squash events, so just one camera pan.
Maybe you can talk a little bit about where you see the future of the sport growing and going, and ultimately how you have plans to integrate that.
Well, I think the way things are shaping up is things are forming into sort of niche communities, and a lot of sports are able to do more because of the internet and the streaming, and you can kind of really. I'm looking to sort of drive a network of squash players to one place and be able to teach them squash and present a brand of squash that is fun, urban, cool, and it's the right sport to play.
So my last question for you, Jonathan, when people are going to look back at, you know, the Jonathon now, the Jonathon, the number one ranked player, what do you think your legacy is going to be? How do you want people to remember you?
Handsome? No, seriously. How do I want? Like, I'm getting old quick. No. How do I want people to remember me? I don't know.
I thought I was the I was going to go with the handsome one.
No, I was feeling insecure. That's why I had to throw that out there.
Nice.
Feeling dominated physically. But no, I don't know. I just want maybe a pioneer for North American squash anyway, and trying to be the guy to help lead the sport into a different period.
Hey man, I gotta say, man, I think you're well, from your past accomplishments to what you're trying to do to push the sport forward in Canada. I think you're well on your way there. This is Jonathon Power. That was a great interview. I appreciate that,
nice.
man.
Cool, man. Thanks.
For the Sports Junkie and for Paxos.com.